October 23, 1942. The scorching sands of the Second Battle of El Alamein, Egypt. Albert Speer, the formidable Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production, read the initial intelligence reports on the new American medium tank with a precise, cold certainty that was characteristic of the German war effort. He had received early field assessments from North Africa detailing the performance of the M4 Sherman as it made its baptism by fire against Rommel's armored veterans. The reports confirmed German confidence. The new American design lacked the thick, sloped armor and high-velocity main gun that characterized the best of German engineering. Reports on the cross-country mobility of the Sherman had been very favorable, the intelligence noted, detailing the tank climbing mountains German tank experts considered inaccessible to tanks. Speer's mathematical mind calculated that any industrial advantage America possessed would be neatly negated by superior German design and the rigorous quality of their craftsmanship. The Reich's entire war strategy was predicated on that singular, validated truth. The best tank was simply the best tank. That logic, honed by years of overwhelming victories, appeared inescapable. What Albert Speer didn't know, what the entire German High Command was mathematically incapable of realizing, was that they were not fighting engineers, they were fighting industrial capacity. The mobility and simplicity Speer praised in the Sherman were not flaws to be exploited, but deliberate design choices for mass production. The industrial capacity, the mobility and simplicity Speer praised in the Sherman were not flaws to be exploited within the next 30 months. From October 1942 until Germany's final collapse in May 1945, the industrial logic of the Reich would be systematically destroyed. While German factories labored to produce approximately 7,900 heavy Panther and Tiger tanks, each one a masterpiece of technical quality, the United States rolled out between 49,234 and 50,000 plus M4 Shermans. That staggering 8-to-1 production ratio was a weapon more devastating than any single gun. It transformed the war from a tactical contest into an unwinnable logistical siege. The Americans had set a single factory peak record, producing 896 M4 tanks in December 1942 alone. This story is about how industrial dominance defeated technical brilliance, how overwhelming quantity became a quality all its own, and how German leaders' confidence transformed into mathematical despair as they faced the relentless, unceasing tide of the M4 Sherman. The story of the M4 began in the wake of the 1940 German Blitzkrieg. As France fell, American tank designers understood that the race for superiority was not defined by a single blueprint, but by the ability to mass-produce that blueprint immediately. While Speer calculated the tactical superiority of the 75mm Kumbuke 42L/70 cannon being mounted on the emerging Panther tank in the secrecy of his Berlin offices, 4,600 miles away in Detroit, Michigan, the Chrysler Engineering Department was already rewriting the mathematics of ground warfare. The urgency began in the summer of 1940, with France shattered and the British Expeditionary Force barely evacuated from Dunkirk. The United States realized its armored arsenal, primarily consisting of the lightly armed M2 medium tank, was catastrophically obsolete against the German panzer divisions. In August 1940, design work began on the sixth, the tank that would become the M4 Sherman, but the true challenge was not the design itself, it was the method of production. The Army Material Command demanded a tank that could be standardized for high-volume mass production across non-traditional defense industries. Every engineer knew that traditionally built tanks, like the German heavy designs, required 150,000 to 300,000 man-hours of master-level craftsmanship. They were asking for an industrial solution, not a precision weapon, and they needed it yesterday. The development was overseen by the Chrysler Engineering Department, but the industrial philosophy was architected by Albert Kahn. Kahn, already renowned for designing the modern American factory, understood that a great weapon was one that could be built quickly by assembly lines staffed by newly trained labor. He envisioned a tank that could be produced in converted automobile plants, using components that were standardized and interchangeable. The M4 was not built for a few thousand expert tank workers. It was designed for the millions of Americans, most of whom had never seen a combat vehicle, who would flood the assembly lines, The mandate was not technical perfection, but absolute industrial reliability and simplicity. The solution the Chrysler engineers developed was simple, robust, and utterly dismissive of the traditional rules of tank design. By late 1941, the first pilot model was complete, a vehicle that prioritized strategic mobilization above all else. The Sherman tank was designed to be the ultimate logistical compromise, excellent cross-country mobility and reliable firepower, packaged in a shell that was easy to manufacture. Unlike the German Tiger variant, which utilized complex interleaved suspension and heavy gauge, tightly specified armor requiring massive specialized steel forges, the M4 used simple vertical volute spring suspension and easily welded plate armor. The Sherman measured 19 feet long with a 20-foot main gun overhang, and combat loaded, it weighed 66,900 to 68,000 plus pounds, approximately 30.3 tons. This was 20 tons lighter than a German Tiger variant. That seemingly lower weight was tied directly to its power plant, a 400-horsepower Continental R97 5-dash cone, a 9-cylinder radial engine adapted from aviation. While this resulted in a respectable maximum speed of 26 mph sustained on level ground, the true advantage lay in maintenance and field service. German engines, engineered for maximum performance, were fragile and complicated. The Sherman's radial was easy to access and repair by basic motor pool staff, delivering an operational range of 120 to 130 miles on roads. For firepower, the early M4 carried the 75mm gun M3L/40, capable of firing 90 to 97 rounds of high explosive and armor-piercing shells. Its maximum frontal protection was 2.0 inches, 51mm of armor on the upper glacis plate, sloped at 56 degrees, giving it an effective thickness of 108mm. However, this armor was woefully inadequate against the emerging German 75mm Kaun K42L/70 of the Panther and the formidable 88mm of the Tiger. German intelligence knew this, yet they missed the primary metric. The Tiger I required an astronomical 300,000 man-hours to produce. The Sherman demanded only 10,000 man-hours. The German Panzer was 30 times more difficult to produce than the American equivalent. This ratio was the true innovation. To German engineer corps analysts initially studying the captured Shermans, the vehicle looked crude, even ugly. They noted the high hull, which made it a large, easily spotted target, and the visible vulnerability of its frontal 76mm glacis. Their engineering philosophy assumed expertise, demanding that the mechanic had proper training and the crew possessed high tactical skill. This Sherman design assumed nothing. One German engineer admitted after analyzing a captured model, "It was designed for idiots." The American design philosophy was simple. An imperfect tank built in mass quantity was strategically superior to a perfect tank built in minute quantity. By late 1942, the M4 Sherman was pouring out of American factories at an unprecedented rate. With 2,000 tanks already deployed overseas, German intelligence knew the American industrial giant was awake, but they could not yet fathom that the war would be determined not by the performance of the first shot fired, but by the relentless, overwhelming production of the second, third, and fourth. The first true engagement in the European theatre would reveal the chilling reality of fighting an enemy whose supply chain knew no rest. By early October 1942, nearly 2,000 M4 Shermans had been delivered overseas, roughly half of that number deployed to the British 8th Army, preparing for the climactic push in North Africa. German intelligence reports, though incomplete, acknowledged the new American armored component, with analysts in Berlin generally echoing Albert Speer's assessment that the tank prioritized mass production and mobility over technical quality. The focus remained on the superior 75mm and 88mm guns being mounted on the upcoming Panther and Tiger I. October 23, 1942. El Alamein, Egypt. The opening barrage of the Second Battle of El Alamein shook the desert floor, signaling the decisive engagement of the North African campaign. In the armoured columns pushing through the dark, dust-choked desert were the Shermans of the British 9th and 2nd Armoured Brigades, numbering approximately 252 tanks, facing the veteran Afrika Korps, of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The engagement immediately validated the Sherman's design philosophy against the existing German armor. The 75mm gun proved capable of destroying the aging Panzer III and IV variants, fielded by the Afrika Korps. Crucially, the Sherman's superior operational reliability and the synchronized logistical support of the American-supplied components allowed the Allied offensive to maintain momentum across vast stretches of desert. When an M4 was damaged, its standardized parts and simplified design, the very traits German engineers found crude, allowed it to be repaired and returned to the line in a fraction of the time required for a complex German panzer. The result was an immediate and definitive Allied victory in North Africa, and the establishment of an Allied armoured superiority in the theatre. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the architect of German armoured warfare, quickly recognized the strategic reality of the new enemy. The Allies could afford to lose 3 or 4 tanks for every German vehicle destroyed and still maintain their offensive momentum, he reported to the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. Rommel understood that the core challenge was not winning a tactical duel, but surviving an industrial siege. However, the interpretation filtering back to Berlin and propagating through the high command became fatally distorted. German analysts, including those in Speer's ministry, praised the Sherman's cross-country mobility, its stabilized gun platform, and the efficiency of its serial construction. Yet they simultaneously deemed its armament and armor fundamentally inferior to the new generation of German heavy armor. This conclusion was reinforced by propaganda. Speer's own assessment, published in the newspaper Das Reich on June 27, 1943, highlighted the American industrial machine's efficiency, but framed it within the context of industrial arrogance. The article noted, the first things to attract attention were serial construction and fulfillment of the almost arrogant requirements of the North American automobile industry. The implication was clear: the Americans were masters of production, but novices in combat engineering. What German analysis didn't emphasize, what they simply refused to credit, were the figures that mattered most. German intelligence in 1943 flatly refused to accept American production figures, concluding they must be wildly inflated for Allied domestic morale. The idea that a single American factory could produce 896 4s in a single month, the record set in December 1942, was dismissed as implausible fantasy because the engineering effort alone, measured by German standards, rendered such output impossible. German engineers obsessed over the technical perfection of the 300,000 man-hours required for a single Tiger, failing to appreciate the strategic impact of the simple 10,000 man-hour Sherman. They were so focused on the quality of a single vehicle that they ignored the relentless strategic weight of 49,000 vehicles. This institutionalized confidence, built on technical precision and the initial tactical superiority of their new heavy designs, circulated throughout the Wehrmacht. They had validated that the Sherman was technically simpler and less armored than the Panzer V Panther, and therefore German technical quality would prevail. Training focused almost exclusively on exploiting the Sherman's high profile and armor weaknesses. They anticipated fighting a technically inferior tank, unaware that their enemy had simply redefined the criteria for victory. Training focused almost exclusively on exploiting the Sherman's high profile and armor weaknesses. They anticipated fighting a technically inferior tank, unaware that their enemy had simply redefined the criteria for victory. The comprehensive test of this flawed German doctrine against the Sherman's numbers, its true strength, would come in the summer of 1944 during the Normandy invasion, where the sheer volume of American armor would transform a tactical advantage into a strategic collapse. By mid-September 1944, the core German conviction that superior technical design would negate American industrial might remained deeply, dangerously ingrained within the Wehrmacht. The high loss rates suffered by American armor, often 3 or 4 Shermans lost for every Panther or Tiger destroyed, reinforced the fatal conclusion first drawn at El Alamein. But near Stolberg, Germany, on September 19, 1944, one M4A1 Sherman would demonstrate a different kind of superiority, one measured not in armor thickness but in the strategic resilience of the human components. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Greenpool, 25 years old, from the farming town of Odom, Texas, was the embodiment of that resilience, but in the strategic resilience of the human components. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Greenpool, 25 years old, from the farming town of Odom, Texas, was the embodiment of that resilience, a high school dropout who enlisted on June 13, 1941. Poole had already survived 2 previous Sherman knockouts in just over 80 days. He commanded the M4 Sherman. In the Mood 3 of the 3rd Platoon, Company 1, 32nd Armored Regiment, 3rd Armored Division, on this day approaching the formidable Siegfried Line near Stolberg, Poole was embarking on his 21st combat mission as a lead tank commander, already credited with a staggering 258 vehicle kills across 83 days of continuous combat. It was shortly after 0900 hours, Poole's M4 76mm variant led the armoured advance through heavy forest terrain, the tank crews alert to the lurking danger of German anti-tank guns. Poole, positioned in the open turret hatch, utilised his height and experience to scan the tree lines, the crisp September air mixing with the diesel fumes and the faint smell of burnt cordite from earlier engagements. Corporal Bert Close, the gunner, and Private First Class Del Boggs, the loader, maintained a state of readiness below, the tank's 76mm high-velocity gun traversing constantly. At a moment where the forest canopy momentarily broke, an invisible 88mm anti-tank gun, expertly concealed and sighted, fired. The shell travelled at over 1,000 meters per second. The first 88mm round from a PaK-43 struck Poole's Sherman, with a sound like a giant hammer hitting a bell. The deafening noise immediately followed by the metallic ping, ping, ping of shrapnel or sparling, ricocheting inside the confined steel hull. Before the M4's internal fire suppression system could activate, before the crew could even process the first hit, the German gunner fired a second round. The second 88mm shell struck the tank in the exact same spot, creating a catastrophic penetration and explosion. Plykurof's catastrophic penetration and explosion. For a 30-ton medium tank, already weakened by the first strike, 2 direct, rapid hits from the most feared anti-tank weapon on the Western Front represented a definitive, unsurvivable death sentence. The combined kinetic and explosive energy of the 2 rounds should have incinerated the entire crew instantaneously, turning the crew compartment into a blast furnace. Instead, the sheer concussive pressure of the explosion found a vent of least resistance, the commander's hatch where Poole was standing. A violent, impossible force slammed into Poole from below. Famue simplas bestending. A violent, impossible force slammed into Poole from below. He was not killed. He was not trapped. He was physically ejected from the turret, like a cork from a bottle, thrown 40 feet into the forest floor, the impact knocking him unconscious. The Sherman, in the Mood 3, was completely disabled, its interior a smoking ruin, the vehicle a total loss, Poole's 3rd tank destroyed in just over 83 days of battle. The unidentified German 88mm gun crew, having scored 2 direct hits on a lead tank, reported a clear kill. They had successfully applied the German doctrine of tactical superiority, using the technically perfect 88mm shell to defeat the technically inferior M4 armor. As the smoke cleared and the subsequent American tanks advanced, the German crew would have seen the wrecked hull, confirming their precision. The German High Command's technical analysis was validated. The 30-ton Sherman was no match for the 88mm. What that German crew did not see, and what the analysts in Berlin would continue to fail to grasp, was the resilience of the American system itself. Within minutes of the impact, surviving crewmen Corporal Bert Close and Private First Class Del Boggs had retrieved their commander. Poole, severely wounded, his right leg all but destroyed, was rushed to a forward medical unit. Within hours, Poole's leg was amputated in a field hospital, the swift action of the American medical system saving his life. The liming with American system is saving his life. The very industrial organization that built the simple tank also designed the most efficient battlefield evacuation and surgical system in history. The Sherman was a loss, but the irreplaceable human asset, the 258-kill commander, was saved. Poole's experience demonstrated the American doctrine of rapid loss replacement, and the survivability of well-trained crews, even against devastating hits. His commanding officer later stated, "The system was designed to absorb the loss of 10,000 man-hour vehicles while preserving 25-year-old men, even against devastating hits." His commanding officer later stated, "The system was designed to absorb the loss of 10,000 man-hour vehicles while preserving 25-year-old men." Poole's survival was not an anomaly, but the first fully documented case of a pattern the Wehrmacht had been dismissing as statistical noise. The survival of key personnel and the ability to continue operations after catastrophic loss was becoming a systemic feature of the American war effort, a new kind of combat metric. In June 1944 at Villers-Bocage, France, Captain Pat Dyers had already survived his Cromwell tank being destroyed by an 88mm round, escaping the blast to fight another day. Poole himself had already demonstrated this loss absorption. On August 7, 1944, near the Falaise Gap, his first Sherman was knocked out. The entire crew survived, received a new tank, and returned to the battle within 24 hours. Just weeks later, his second Sherman was destroyed, and again the crew survived, receiving in the Mood 3. The pattern was that the American fighting unit, unlike the German, was not irrevocably tied to the fate of a single vehicle. The most chilling evidence of this systemic shift was delivered not by individual survivals, but by tactical reversal. In September 1944, near Accourt, France, American Sherman crews employing disciplined tactics and taking advantage of superior high-explosive shells ambushed and destroyed 8 German Panthers at 600 meters, a range where German doctrine considered the Panthers' superior armor invulnerable, while suffering 0 Sherman losses. The American tankers, though in a technically inferior vehicle, were defeating the Panzer Masters. The survival of Staff Sergeant Minnick in November 1944 in the Hoogden Forest, who single-handedly killed 20 and captured 20 Germans before finally succumbing to a mine, further cemented the image of an enemy whose individual tenacity matched their industrial depth. The accumulating after-action reports describing Sherman's surviving damage that would have instantly destroyed a Panzer forced a high-level reassessment. Between the Normandy landings in June 1944 and the end of the year, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht received nearly 400 separate reports detailing American armor-absorbing hits that no German vehicle could withstand without total crew loss. Initial explanations attributing it to poor American 88mm ammunition or luck were quickly exhausted. On October 1, 1944, General Oberst Heinz Guderian ordered a comprehensive analysis. Examine this American loss absorption capability, Guderian ordered, and report on the strategic implications of the enemy's continuous return of highly experienced crews to the line. The subsequent formal assessment, completed in early November 1944, concluded, the American M4 tank is a mediocre combat vehicle, but the system it represents is overwhelmingly superior. They identified that the Sherman's high-volume production, combined with its high crew survivability, the result of simplified design and advanced medical support, was creating an inescapable mathematics of attrition. The technical quality of the Panther was irrelevant if the American system could maintain an 8-to-1 production superiority, while ensuring that experienced crews, such as Lafayette Poole, were back in the fight within days of total vehicle loss. The tactical implications were clear. For every Sherman destroyed, 2 more appeared, became a quote common in Wehrmacht after-action reports. What had been a tactical challenge was rapidly becoming a strategic guarantee of defeat, and by the spring of 1945, the consequences of that guarantee would become visible across the entire European theatre. By early November 1944, Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole's survival was no longer an isolated incident, but the first comprehensively documented example of a pattern that would systematically destroy the German concept of technical superiority across the European theatre over the next 6 months. Between October 1942 and May 1945, the M4 Sherman would transform from an initially mocked simple medium tank into the overwhelming, relentless symbol of Allied industrial capacity, demonstrating a quantitative superiority in engagement after engagement, where German armored units found themselves simply drowned in American steel. October 23, November 11, 1942. El Alamein, Egypt. The introduction of the Sherman alongside the British 8th Army established immediate armoured superiority over the Afrika Korps's Panzer III and IVs. Allied operational tempo was sustained by the Sherman's reliability, proving the simple tank superior in the logistical context of the Desert Campaign. June 6, 1944. D-Day Normandy landings, Normandy, France. Shermans from the 2nd and 3rd Armoured Divisions established a continuous, indelible armoured presence on the European mainland within hours of the initial assault waves. Their rapid deployment and sheer numbers negated the initial German advantage of mobility and allowed the continuous build-up that guaranteed the beachhead would hold. June 13, 1944. Villers-Bocage, Normandy, France. Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved a swift tactical victory, destroying several British tanks in an ambush, demonstrating the Tiger I's superior 88mm gun and heavy armour. Yet, the strategic result remained unchanged. The M4's continuous presence prevented the German counterattack from exploiting the success, and the overwhelming Allied offensive continued its inexorable push inland. September 18–29, 1944. Battle of Aricourt, Lorraine, France. The 4th U.S. Armored Division decisively defeated a German counteroffensive centered around the Panzer Brigade 106, which fielded numerous Panthers. The Americans lost 32 vehicles, the Germans lost 200 armored vehicles. This demonstrated that American crews, employing superior tactics and leveraging air support, could systematically defeat technically superior German designs in open battle. November 2nd, December 13th, 1944. Hürtgen Forest Campaign, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The dense forest terrain severely negated the Sherman's mobility and favored dug-in German anti-tank defenses and heavy armor. Despite the terrain advantage, the M4 Shermans absorbed catastrophic losses but maintained the line through sheer, relentless volume, preventing the German line from collapsing despite high attrition rates. December 16, 1944 – January 25, 1945. Battle of the Bulge, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The final, desperate German offensive was defeated not by the technical quality of American armor, but by overwhelming numerical superiority and logistical resilience. The Wehrmacht initially outflanked American positions, but the continuous, immediate deployment of thousands of Shermans and supporting vehicles ensured the lines were sealed, trapping the German advance. The M4 Sherman design and its employment evolved continuously throughout the 1944 and 1945 campaigns, transforming American ground forces into a self-correcting organism. Integrated air-ground armor coordination, including direct tank-to-aircraft radio links, was perfected by July 1944, allowing Sherman units immediate air support to suppress long-range German anti-tank positions, a form of tactical protection no German unit could match. Furthermore, recognizing the mobility impediment posed by the dense Norman hedgerows, American crews field-modified Rhino hedgerow cutting prongs in July 1944. This innovation allowed Shermans to smash through obstacles rather than be funneled to roads, instantly restoring the mobility advantage that was central to their design philosophy. This systematic, rapid adaptation to the battlefield outpaced German attempts at counter-development. German command recognized the pattern of quantitative defeat by late 1943 and attempted systematic countermeasures, each born of sound technical logic and each failing against the sheer scale of the American industrial machine. Visulcon of sound technical logic and each failing against the sheer scale of the American industrial machine. Lisinavevtlagmor the battlefield of Panther tank development. The Panzer V Panther was strategically implemented from 1943 onward. The Oberkommando des Heeres believed its formidable 75mm Kampfscharm 42-gun and sloped armor would restore tactical superiority. Although technically superior to the M4, the Panther was plagued by mechanical unreliability and its complex design meant low production numbers. The production ratio of the Panther to the Sherman remained approximately 1:8, guaranteeing the Panther's fate as a high-quality weapon that could never be deployed in decisive volume. Long-range engagement doctrine. German field commanders adopted a defensive strategy based on long-range ambushes, utilizing the superior optics and muzzle velocity of their guns. The rationale was to destroy Shermans before the M4 could close to effective firing range. This was partially successful tactically, allowing German units to inflict high losses initially. But this doctrine failed strategically, as it ceded all initiative to the Allies. Long-range positions were inevitably outflanked by the fast-moving American columns or systematically destroyed by the integrated American air power that the German command structure could not suppress. Tiger I and II heavy tank deployment. The deployment of the Tiger I and Tiger II represented the ultimate German belief in technical superiority. The 88mm armed tanks were virtually immune to frontal attack by the 75mm Shermans, while tactically devastating with a kill ratio often exceeding 10-1 in specific engagements. This policy was a strategic failure. Only approximately 1,900 Tiger I and II variants were produced during the war, compared to 50,000 Shermans, a devastating 1-26 ratio. Each Tiger success only accelerated the psychological and industrial defeat by diverting critical resources from vehicles that could have been produced in quantity. The unrelenting, systematic nature of the quantitative defeat created a psychological impact that was as devastating as the physical losses. The technical term for the resulting mental state in the German panzer crews was not recorded, but the symptoms were. Wehrmacht panzer crew reports from Normandy in 1944 documented a profound sense of helplessness and industrial panic. Panzer crews reported feeling increasingly helpless against an enemy that seemed to possess infinite resources and the meaninglessness of any tactical victory. Germany was drowning in American steel. General Oberst Wilhelm Keitel would later summarize. The industrial panic became systematic. General Heinz Guderian noted, Germany never had a chance once American production reached full capacity. The Wehrmacht could win tactical victories, but tactics meant nothing against an enemy that could replace losses faster than you could inflict them. After-action reports frequently contained the same devastating observation. For every Sherman destroyed, 2 more appeared. German tank commanders, accustomed to numerical superiority, or at least parity, found themselves consistently outnumbered. By 1945, the German armored forces had not been merely defeated, they had been economically and psychologically obliterated by a quantitative reality they had refused to believe. By early 1945, the systemic 8-1 production ratio and the Sherman's overwhelming loss absorption capability had destroyed the German concept of technical superiority at the tactical level. But tactical dominance transformed into a strategic revolution when the M4 Sherman forced the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht to fundamentally restructure their armored warfare doctrine across the European theater, beginning in the summer of 1944. Between the Normandy invasion and the final collapse in 1945, the German command was forced to abandon offensive armored capacity, reallocate limited resources, and implement a purely defensive, attrition-based approach. Changes documented in official reports that revealed a reluctant, painful acknowledgement of American industrial invulnerability. The most significant doctrinal shift was the evolution of the American system itself, which leveraged the Sherman's simplicity to achieve decisive combat synergy. By June and July 1944, American armored units perfected integrated air-ground armor coordination, utilizing direct tank-to-aircraft radio links. This integration allowed Sherman units, often utilizing high-explosive rounds, to quickly suppress long-range German anti-tank positions and call in immediate air support to destroy superior German heavy tanks, a combined arms approach the fuel-starved Wehrmacht could not counter. This doctrine, more than any armor upgrade, led to a post-war calculated 3.6-1 kill ratio against Panther tanks, a decisive margin that defied the M4's supposed technical inferiority. The German High Command, including the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, was forced to formalize a shift from offensive Blitzkrieg to a defensive quality over quantity doctrine. This was not a choice, but a surrender to reality. This ends a meft saloten verlomica de ends of godlings. OKW directives issued in late 1944 ordered all new panzer units to prioritize ambushes and static defense, effectively ceding the initiative. The previous doctrine had been built on decisive mobile engagements where German engineering dictated the terms of battle. The new directive confirmed the outcome is determined by production statistics, a painful admission that removed panzer units from their historical role. The implementation of this defensive shift led to a systematic demotion of the panzer arm from a decisive offensive force to a stationary defense asset, a direct consequence of the Sherman's unrelenting mass and mobility. The Sherman was the decisive factor in several campaigns, not through singular battlefield prowess, but through its ability to provide mass, logistical flexibility, and the quantitative foundation for rapid strategic exploitation. The Battle of Aracourt, September 18–29, 1944, was the myth-shattering engagement where the American 4th Armored Division, utilizing Shermans, decisively defeated a German counter-offensive centered on Panzer Brigade 106, which was fully equipped with the technically superior Panther. The Sherman's high mobility, superior crew training, and sheer number decisively defeated the 75 mm armed Panther in an open-field tank battle. The Americans lost 32 vehicles, the Germans lost 200 armored vehicles. The contrafactual reality was that, without the M4's superior operational tempo and the crew's ability to leverage tactical coordination, the technically superior Panther should have dominated the open terrain. The initial advance in Normandy was hampered by the dense hedgerow country, bocage, but the Sherman proved critical in Operation Cobra Breakout, July 1944, not for its gun, but for its adaptability. American crews field-modified Rhino hedgerow cutting prongs, a simple industrial solution, which restored the M4's essential mobility advantage, enabling the rapid breakout from the beachhead and the exploitation into open France. Without the Sherman's mass deployability and the rapid industrial field modification capability, the Allied advance would have stalled, granting the Wehrmacht time to consolidate defenses. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had already noted the overwhelming strategic difficulty. The Allies could afford to lose 3 or 4 tanks for every German vehicle destroyed, and still maintain their offensive momentum. The Sherman made that momentum possible. The Germans' final major offensive in the Ardennes Forest, the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944 – January 1945, required irreplaceable tank losses, and its failure was a direct result of American logistical and production superiority. The Wehrmacht gambled on a swift tactical victory, but the immediate, continuous deployment of thousands of Shermans and supporting vehicles ensured the German advance was trapped and subsequently destroyed. The contrafactual is clear. Had the Wehrmacht faced the material parity of 1942, the offensive might have succeeded. Instead, the M4 simply arrived in such numbers and with such speed that the offensive was mathematically doomed within 72 hours of its launch. Intelligence assessments captured post-war combined with post-conflict interrogations provided a systematic, if reluctant, admission of the Sherman's strategic impact. U.S. Army Ballistic Research Lab's 1946 post-war study formally concluded that the Sherman achieved a 3.6-to-1 kill ratio against Panther tanks in combat, a ratio attributed not to armor or gun caliber, but to superior numbers, crew training, and maintenance. This confirmed scientifically what the Wehrmacht had witnessed emotionally. Post-war interrogations revealed German high command understanding exceeded wartime public statements. General Oberst Wilhelm Keitel, in his post-war statement, confirmed the total nature of the defeat. By late 1944, perhaps earlier, German defeat had become inevitable. The sheer weight of Allied material superiority, particularly American production, made continued resistance futile. Germany was drowning in American steel. Demanding 44, perhaps earlier, the consensus among 200-plus senior German officers by late 1944 was that the war was mathematically lost. Major Hermann Kohl, an Afrika Korps industrial engineer, noted in a suppressed wartime report that summarized this realization: "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting an entire continent's industrial output. The outcome is determined by production statistics, not battlefield courage." The production statistics alone documented the mathematical impossibility of German victory, with 49,234 to 50,000 plus M4 Shermans produced versus approximately 7,900 Panthers/Tigers. The American numerical advantage stood at ~8 to 1. At peak production, the US manufactured 896 Shermans per month, while Germany peaked at only ~400 tanks and tank destroyers combined per month. Furthermore, the US replacement rate was ~72 hours from factory to operational unit. Compared to Germany's 14-plus days, the American 8 to 1 numerical advantage became decisive in mid-1943 when monthly American Sherman production exceeded the total number of German heavy tanks lost per month. Germany could not compete. Resource constraints, infrastructure bombardment, and complex designs prevented production scale. Mathematically, victory became impossible because the enemy absorbed tactical losses automatically while German losses accumulated irreplaceably. This quantitative devastation led directly to the German High Command's bleak consensus. General Oberst Wilhelm Keitel's admission was final: Germany was drowning in American steel. The industrial annihilation preceded the military defeat, and the M4 Sherman, simple, mass-produced, and relentless, was the instrument of that mathematical destruction. By May 1945, the Sherman's mass-produced and relentless was the instrument of that mathematical destruction. By May 1945, the Sherman's mass-produced and relentless was the instrument of that mathematical destruction. By May 1945, the Sherman's mass-produced and relentless was the instrument of that mathematical destruction. But the numbers reveal a scale that neither tactical nor strategic analysis can fully capture. Between 1940 and 1945, the American industrial capacity produced results measured not in battles won, but in fundamental restructuring of global manufacturing capability, quantities that redefined industrial warfare's mathematics permanently. The final statistics of the conflict confirmed the magnitude of the M4 Sherman's industrial dominance. 49,234 to 50,000 plus M4 Shermans were manufactured during the war, a testament to its design being optimized for low man-hour production, requiring only 10,000 man-hours per unit. This flood of armor was deployed relentlessly. The eventual loss rate against the formidable Panther was officially calculated in a post-war study to be a 3.6 to 1 kill ratio in the Sherman's favor, a margin achieved through superior numbers, crew training, and maintenance, not gun caliber. Crucially, the M4 was structurally designed to maximize crew survival, resulting in demonstrably lower crew mortality rates than comparable German tanks, ensuring that experienced tankers like Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole returned to the fight. This systemic ability to absorb losses and preserve personnel was the true strategic metric. The total scale of Allied armor deployment dwarfed any German effort, forcing a continuous, devastating trade-off that annihilated the Wehrmacht's armored capabilities. The industrial output demonstrated by the Sherman's production and the rapid creation of the specialized tooling required to maintain it revealed the latent, unmatched industrial power of the United States. The story of the Sherman did not end with the ceasefire. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole, the protagonist of the war's most improbable survival, became a living testament to the system's resilience. Though he lost his right leg near Stolberg, his career was not over. Poole, the tanker credited with 258 vehicle kills, was recalled to active duty in 1948 as an instructor at Fort Knox, the very heart of American armor training. Despite his severe disability, he continued training a new generation of tankers, instilling the hard-won lessons of mobility, crew coordination, and the importance of rapid logistics. He retired on September 19, 1960 as a Chief Warrant Officer 2 ND Class, exactly 16 years to the day after his final impossible engagement. His career surviving 3 knockouts and then returning to duty transformed him into a symbol of American resilience and the survivability of the M4 Sherman design itself. His continued service underscored the strategic point of the M4. The vehicle was replaceable, the human experience was invaluable, and the American system was designed to save the latter. The Sherman's legacy extended beyond military training into post-war industrial and technical evolution. The standardized modular production techniques pioneered by Chrysler and used to build the M4 became the blueprint for post-war heavy equipment manufacturing. The radial engines, the simple suspension, and the rapid assembly methods were adopted and refined, influencing decades of manufacturing from earth movers to heavy trucks. Doctrinal influence was equally profound. The American emphasis on combined arms, the integral role of high-explosive rounds against soft targets, and the necessity of immediate air support, all principles validated by the Sherman's combat experience, were incorporated into NATO doctrine. The Sherman, which appeared crude to German eyes, demonstrated that an effective solution was one that could be mass-produced, easily repaired, and quickly upgraded, a philosophy that continues to inform modern military procurements. Ultimately, the Sherman story transcends the specific conflict, revealing a universal principle about the nature of strategic victory in modern total war. The history demonstrates that victory is determined not by the technical superiority of a single weapon, but by the overwhelming, sustained industrial capacity and logistical efficiency to deploy and maintain that weapon in insurmountable numbers. Germany's 1942 confidence reflected a fatal failure to understand that America's peacetime inefficiency masked a wartime potential that leveraged decentralized innovation, resource abundance, and private sector efficiency. As Albert Speer would later admit, Germany could not win a production war against the combined industrial capacity of the United States. October 23, 1942, Albert Speer's mathematical mind had calculated that superior German design and engineering would negate any American industrial advantage, dismissing the M4 as a crude, simple tank. The inversion, what Speer and the Wehrmacht deemed a negligible industrial capability, became a quantitative tidal wave, with 50,000-plus Shermans demonstrating that American production exceeded German comprehension by margins that rendered tactical excellence strategically irrelevant. General Heinz Guderian, the father of the Panzer arm, summarized the final truth. Germany never had a chance once American production reached full capacity. The Americans couldn't build tanks, the Wehrmacht once believed. They built 50,000 and changed the mathematics of war forever. Germany never had a chance once American production reached full capacity.